beautiful. You're the greatest of all time.
Nobody predicted this. Not the studio, not the analysts, not the people who spent years making it. When the tracking numbers first dropped for the Michael movie, Hollywood insiders were saying $50, maybe $60 million opening weekend. The kind of number that gets a biopic called a success without anybody losing sleep. And then the actual weekend happened. $97 million domestically, $217 million globally. First weekend, the biggest music biopic opening in the entire history of cinema by nearly $40 million. To put that in perspective, Straight Outta Compton held that record at $60 million. Bohemian Rhapsody opened to 51. Elvis managed 31. Michael didn't edge past those numbers. It erased them so completely that people in the industry are still trying to figure out what just happened. But here's the thing, the raw numbers are only half the story. Because what was happening inside those theaters, that's where this gets genuinely fascinating. The moment this film dropped, it didn't feel like a regular release. It felt like an event. Sold-out screenings. Shows selling out before the previews even started. And people weren't sitting quietly in their seats. They were clapping, dancing, reacting out loud to moments on screen the way people react at concerts, not movies. And then they went home, got on social media, and pulled their friends back in for a second viewing. That behavior, the repeat viewing, the communal energy, the word of mouth spreading faster than any marketing campaign, is the single most important signal in Hollywood. It's the difference between a movie that opens big and one that runs big, and this one is running. But what makes this even more interesting is who is watching. This isn't just longtime fans who grew up with Michael Jackson. Entire new generations are discovering him in that theater like it's happening for the first time. That crossover almost never happens with biopics. Usually the hype dies after opening weekend, the conversation fades, and the studio counts their money and moves on. This is not doing that. And to understand why, you have to go back to how this film was actually built. Most people don't realize this movie was never treated like a typical music biopic behind the scenes. It was constructed like a blockbuster from the ground up. And the difference shows. Start with the director, Antoine Fuqua. Not someone known for safe, predictable storytelling. This is the man behind Training Day and The Equalizer, films built on intensity and impact. You bring him into a Michael Jackson project and the expectation immediately shifts. Then you add Graham King as producer, the same man who shepherded Bohemian Rhapsody from risky concept to global phenomenon and an Academy Award for Best Picture. He knows exactly how to take a music legend story and turn it into something that plays worldwide, not just for the core fan base. But the real advantage, the one that separated this from every biopic that came before it, was full access to the Michael Jackson estate. Real music, real choreography, real archive material. The kind of authenticity that cannot be faked and cannot be licensed around. When you watch this film, you are watching Michael Jackson's actual artistry being brought back to life, not a studio-approved approximation of it. That combination of creative firepower and unprecedented access is what separated this from everything that came before it. But even with all of that, one decision changed the entire conversation. The moment people saw Jafar Jackson on screen, something shifted. This wasn't another actor who spent 6 months studying Michael's moves and hoping the imitation would land. This was family. Someone who didn't just learn the performance, he grew up inside it. And you can feel that difference from the first frame he appears in. The way he walks, the way he holds his hands, the micro expressions that happen between the big moments. None of it feels rehearsed. None of it feels like someone trying to convince you. Early clips started circulating online before most people had even seen the film. Not because of a marketing push, but because viewers genuinely couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some said it felt like watching Michael Jackson actually alive again. That is an extraordinary thing to say about an actor. And it is an extraordinarily dangerous level of expectation to set. But it worked, because once an audience believes what they're seeing on screen, they don't just watch, they feel. And that emotional connection is what turns a movie into something bigger than a movie. But here's where things get complicated. Because not everyone is feeling the same thing. There is a massive, almost unprecedented divide happening right now between professional critics and regular moviegoers. And it tells you everything about why this film is so polarizing. On Rotten Tomatoes, only 37% of critics gave it a positive review. The consensus. While Jafar Jackson brings an uncanny precision to the performance, the film plays like a greatest hits album that never digs deep enough. Critics called it sanitized, surface level, a celebration that deliberately sidesteps the most controversial chapters of Jackson's life. The abuse allegations, the legal battles, the complicated human being beneath the myth. Audiences gave it an A on CinemaScore. 90% said they'd recommend it. People were literally dancing inside the theaters. So who's right? The critics aren't wrong that the film makes choices. The decision to focus on the music and the artistry rather than the accusations is not an accident. It's a position. And depending on where you stand on Michael Jackson's legacy, that position either feels like a tribute or a cover-up. But here's the uncomfortable truth the numbers force you to confront. The world showed up anyway. $217 million in one weekend from audiences who knew exactly what they were getting into and chose to go regardless. That tells you something about the relationship people have with Michael Jackson's music that no review score can fully capture. And the conversation isn't cooling down. If anything, the critical backlash is fueling the engagement, keeping the debate alive on social media, pulling more people in out of curiosity. That tension between what critics want from the film and what audiences came to feel is exactly what's keeping this at the top of every entertainment conversation. As of right now, Michael has crossed $400 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film of 2026. Current projections put it on track for $700 million, which would place it alongside Lionsgate's biggest films of all time, right next to the Hunger Games and Twilight franchises. Let that sink in. A music biopic sitting in the same conversation as those franchises. And it's not stopping there. A sequel is already being discussed. The Lionsgate chairman has publicly stated they are positioning themselves to deliver more, and noted that 30% of material from the original 3.5-hour cut could be repurposed for a future film. This was never just a movie. It was always the opening chapter. Here's the question I want to leave you with, because it's the most interesting thing about all of this. Michael just became the biggest biopic opening in history. Bigger than Oppenheimer, bigger than Elvis, bigger than anything. And it did it while deliberately avoiding the most controversial chapters of its subject's life. What does that tell us? It tells us the world still has an unbelievable hunger for Michael Jackson. The music, the movement, the myth. But it also tells us something quieter and maybe more uncomfortable, that the full story hasn't been told yet. Maybe it can't be. Maybe the gap between the icon and the man is simply too wide for one film to bridge. Maybe that's why the conversation never ends. Whatever side of that debate you land on, the records are broken and the king of pop is back at the center of global culture. Not as nostalgia, not as a relic, as a force that still moves the world 35 years after his peak and 15 years after his death. That is not something that can be manufactured. That is not something that can be marketed into existence. That is something that only a handful of artists in the entire history of music have ever achieved. So, did you watch the Michael movie? Where do you stand on it? Drop it in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started.